with the setting and the music, it's ideal for our theme of connecting beyond the rational mind. We've got a fascinating and very diverse array of talks for you today, but I'll not bore you with any preamble. I'd like to get straight into it. Just one quick word of question really to the speakers. We are being videoed. If you don't want your video to be passed on to anywhere, then do let us know and we'll exclude it. But it's really just for posterity, so we think we're going to have a good day. It'd be a shame not to share it. Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to start by setting the scene with a little bit about how I've come to be in this position now. Literally 40 years ago, I was a fresher here in Bangor coming to study electronic engineering. I was a very left-brain person, very practical, very intellectual. And here I am now doing Reiki, talking about transcendence and all sorts of very, very different ways of thinking. And to me, what we're trying to do today is to bring together the intellectual understanding of consciousness beyond the rational with the experiential, with that inner, deeper connection. And to me, it's very much a personal journey. So by sharing my journey, I hope to introduce today.
This is it. Oh, where's it going?
Yeah.
It's on the chair there behind you.
Oh, behind you.
It's behind you. I think it does work though, just check it.
Oh, no, it was working. So for about a number of years I went on and with electronic engineering, forefront of technology stuff. But after a while, okay. And when I left Bangor as a young undergraduate, I needed this intellectual cut and thrust. So I joined Mentor, a IQ Society, and was local secretary in Northamptonshire. And I began to get frustrated with how they thought that the intellect was the be-all and the end-all. So I founded the sensitive scheme, where we could talk about not just intellectual intelligence, but emotional intelligence. And I wrote an article, The Emotional Quotient, in 1987. This was way before Daniel Goleman made emotional intelligence popular. So this is actually the first acknowledged publication of the term EQ. So that is how I first came into things a bit beyond the rational and the intellectual. And while I was a member of Mentor, we had various local meetings, one of which was on dowsing. So here I was, an electronic engineer, everything rational and scientifically explained, and I went to this dowsing meeting, and I found like a dowse. This pendulum started spinning around someone's local leg, which I didn't know was broken. And that, to me, that was one of these first moments when I knew there was more than science was currently explaining. And that began my search into things like dowsing, like the Tao Te Ching, and related topics. And it really was quite a shock for a scientist to found the dowse. But without that sort of shock, then do we really change out of our old way of thinking? So during all this, I was working for what was Presley of NGC, and one of my roles was chairman of the European group on reliability. We were talking about state-of-the-art electronics, what made it work, what made it fail. And we would meet a couple of times a year all around Europe. This one was in Nokia, so your Nokia phones in Helsinki. But even there, even though we were talking about all this science and so on, it was very much about the people. And what I realised was that to get good quality, good reliability, yeah, you could get the science right, you needed to, but if you weren't getting the people on board, it would all go to pot. And at this meeting, this was, any of you who have ever worked in Finland, part of the ethos is that you go and have a sauna together. You undress, you have a sauna together. That is how they do business. And those of you connected with the Confucius Institute and working with China will know there is a very different culture associated with how we work. So even in the work environment, I was learning that there is far more to success than the ones and the noughts, the logic and so on. So this was the sort of thing I was involved in. The technical papers, 5,000 cuts the physics of device failure through a series of activated microscopic events. Now you say, what's that got to do with what we're talking about? Actually, it's got a lot. Because this is the idea that if something is about to fail or about to become a success, you gradually have little things happening, then suddenly there'll be a threshold. There'll be a big step. Suddenly something will change. So even though this was in Policy and Reliability Journal, it was very much about thresholds, about what's happening at the quantum level, what's happening underneath the radar. Likewise, I was writing about total quality management in research and development, which again is about the people, about integrating things. What's happening, what the designers doing, what the marketing people are doing, and so on. They need to talk to each other. They need to understand how each other is feeling. So this is quite interesting. Although nominally I was very much an engineer, very much come at it from the scientific point of view, I was already realising that there's far more to life and success than that. And then, around about somewhere in the mid-90s, someone introduced me to Reiki. A friend of mine was doing it, they wanted someone to practice on. They gave me some Reiki, and that was another of those moments that changed me. So something about it that I can't put into words, I knew there was something else happening. And it so impressed me, I then took up Reiki myself. I did training first and second degree, and then started teaching. So, at this point, there's no point just talking about it. I'd like to give you a little demonstration. So, how many of you have actually done Reiki or had some Reiki treatment? Quite a few of you actually. So, what I'd like you to do is to sit behind someone else. So I want you to pair up. And you're just going to do a little bit of Reiki to the person in front of you. So if you could stand behind these people, okay?
And if you haven't done it,
it doesn't matter if you've never done it. It's open to everyone. So just stand there behind their doors. Okay, have you all got someone in front of you? I know. What I'd like to do is, is everybody paired up somewhere? If you can all now, just place your hands very gently on the head of the person in front of you. Just check they're happy with that. Okay. And just close your eyes. Take a deep breath in. And as you breathe in, imagine that you're breathing in a sense of peace, a sense of calm. And as you breathe out, just breathe out any doubts, concerns, confusions you might have. Breathe in and breathe out. And you may be aware that under the hands, on the head, it's feeling warm or it's tingling. Let's focus on that sensation. And if you can't feel anything, then imagine that under the hands is a golden ball or purple flame, some source of heat or light. And as you breathe, feel that sensation just spread out from the hands, out from the head. The mind starts to wander, just bring it back to any sensation or to your breathing. And if your hands are getting tired, then allow them to fall to the shoulder. Just breathe in a sense of peace, of connection. And connecting to your own inner healer. Connecting to your own inner self. Connecting to each other. And connecting beyond thought. Thank you. And when you're ready, open your eyes. And share what you're feeling with the other person. Good way of drawing attention, I like that.
Yeah, go and get a bit higher if you want.
So I think you get the gist. Have just a couple of minutes of that sort of experience that takes you into a different mindset. Anybody like to share anything that they felt or experienced during those minutes? Plenty of time to share those.
It was lovely, it was nice.
Yes, because you just rushed me. So that happened to me, that was in the mid-1990s, and at the same time where I was working was taken over, became far more controlled by the accountants, and it lost its heart and soul. So I left my job in electronics to become a Reiki practitioner, to teach Reiki and do holistic therapy and so on. And that led me to start to do some healing art, and eventually I moved to Portugal. This is the Algarve, where I was based. And if anybody is looking for a nice little retreat in the Algarve, if it's currently up for sale, please let me know if you're interested. The main thing about that was it was my time for facing myself. It was just me and these acres of eucalyptus trees, and I had to face my own fears, I had to face my own demons. So that was my years, the dark night of the soul. And again, that to me was very much, has always been part of the process. And I know, those of you who I know well, you know I've been through it, I know you've been through it. And part of this journey of connecting to other levels of consciousness means we have to face our demons, we have to look at our dark sides. And this is what I did this time. And then that phase of my life came to a natural end, and I knew I had to do something else. And I thought, what next, where next? And I was drawn back here to Bangor, where I did my PhD. And I just had to do it on this sort of topic. Transcendent experiences, process and practice within the transcendence movement, and today is an example of the transcendence movement. So it's those individuals who are not just talking about high levels of consciousness, they're getting there, they're living it, they're being it. And what I got from doing the PhD were two things. One was just how disconnected from this sort of world most of the academic world is, but how within every academic discipline there were signs of the light of this deeper truth. And it was really quite heartwarming to know that if you looked in the right places, in different disciplines, right across the spectrum, you would find this idea of a transcendent experience of a consciousness beyond the rational. So I can conclude from all this, so this is a 40-year personal experience where from being a normal rational thinker, by seeking, by looking at my own personal growth needs, and being willing to experience, being open to different perspectives. So when, as an engineer, I had a dowsing experience, I was open enough to think, okay, yeah, there's something going on here, and to pursue it. But the other thing that really came through very clearly for me was that we can't be taught this in the conventional way. We can't tell people ... You've got to feel it at this level. So that I hope is a real reasonable introduction to why we're here today and what I mean by beyond thought, consciousness beyond the rational. And as we go through the rest of the day, we'll hear other people's personal journeys, approaches and different ways in which we can break through this rational mind and how the nagging, insistent ways of thinking can get in the way. But how can we get through those? Okay, any questions, any comments?
I'd just like to say, as I come from the scientific background, a couple of hundred years ago, people had a very Catholic, it was more seen view of knowledge. So I was in Cambridge, the head of the physics department in Cambridge was a professor of natural philosophy. So there never was this sense that there was this very hard world and these other worlds. And I'm just wondering where this came from, really, and how we've got to where we are, because, the professor of natural philosophy, natural philosophy was the way the world worked. And so we come to a place whereby there's a sort of hard, the engineer, who better not mention Flaubert. I mean, you don't get that in France, or I think other countries. I don't know why we got to where we got to, but it always sort of worries me. I'm worrying from the other side in a few minutes, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, having been in that world. And
yeah, no, absolutely. And as if you think about it, if you go back far enough, then astronomy and astrology were the same thing. I suppose it was from the Enlightenment, wasn't it? It was. I would blame Descartes. I think therefore I am. That was the source of all our problems, I would say. But, and there are papers which support that view. I can give you a few quotes on that. So,
certainly a very interesting thing is, Isaac Newton was in Trinity College, Cambridge. They set him up a laboratory to do alchemy, to turn lead into gold. Now, he spent most of his time doing, we'd say, rather silly, you can't turn lead into gold. Nobody knew that. So he was an alchemist. I mean, now it seems, if I said I was an alchemist, you say, thank you, you're not going to be shortlisted in this floor below. But that's very interesting, isn't it? Not only that, but there wasn't this distinction between the sort of credible science and that which is not quite so credible. So, obviously what you're talking about is some way along the spectrum, and I think it's very interesting,
It is very true. And what was reassuring as I was doing my PhD was, certainly in the last maybe 20 years, there have been more and more researchers willing and able to say, well, look, we do have to break free of this old way of thinking. And one of the things I referred to quite a lot was various trends in research. As a researcher, we now can talk about action research or participative inquiry, where it is accepted if you really want to know what's going on with something with an emotional quotient, you do actually have to immerse yourself in it. So again, we couldn't have said that 30 years ago. So things are changing. Likewise with education, with teaching and learning. The idea of experiential learning is far more embedded in the system. And it's accepted that if you want to teach something, you engage people in it. So I think it's out of its worst. I think there are now enough signs that the two ways are coming together again. But it is only the four thinkers, the visionaries who are really doing it as yet. But it's got a lot to answer for, which is why events like this are so important. Any other questions, comments?
I would comment because it was interesting. That set me off down the train of thought, thinking, where did it all become so difficult and so hard? I can't help but think that conventional religion has something to do with it in the owning of the spiritual. And I would also, my mind goes to the witch trials and how we lost so much of our indigenous spiritual knowledge through, in many ways, towards this idea of what we can control and what we can't control.
Yeah.
And I would also, my mind goes to the Industrial Revolution and this trend into capitalism, where we become measured, our value becomes measured by what we can produce and earn. And so what we can control and what we can produce and what we're worthy all starts to lend us towards what can we manage and measure, away from something that we can't control, and that feeling of fear that comes from stepping over the threshold into something that we can't control, into the chaos, is something that requires a maturity of spirit that can't be commoditized. And so I feel that's perhaps a lot to do with the movement away from intuitive and instinctive behaviour.
Absolutely. It is. And which is why I said on my personal journey, a lot of it has been facing the fear, because to acknowledge this consciousness beyond the level means letting go, not being in control. And we're so conditioned to be in control. All the systems, a lot of society is based on controlling this, controlling that, controlling how we think. And it's scary not being in control.
It's mechanistic, isn't it? Everything's mechanistic.
That's right.
I'm particularly interested in, I don't know much about it, but quantum physics, because so far as I understand, it's probably not a lot, but there are, is that we create our own reality.
And I think there is some, again, to answer David's question in a way, the quantum physics, and I'm sure we're going to hear about this in David's talk that's coming up, but a lot of what's coming out of there is that if we go into quantum, it's all about probability. It's all about, by looking at something by our own focus of attention, that creates a reality, which is just so different from the mechanistic way in which most of us have been brought up. Yes, absolutely.
Just hearing people talk and hearing the kind of, I don't want to say inevitability, but I can definitely see a cultural trend moving into the appreciation of areas more like this. So, for example, framing historically divisive thought in the Industrial Revolution and a very divisive categorising mindset, which was, I think, perhaps necessary for exploring such unknown parts of the physical world. But if you compare that to the society we live in now, which is much more disposable, much more subtle, I think there does seem to be a greater appreciation of trying to apply rational thoughts to things that were perhaps conceived beyond the rational. My background is in psychology, and things like dowsing intrigue me, and I don't feel that it's necessary anymore to say, I don't understand this, therefore let's relegate it, but perhaps trying to use thought processes like appreciation of the senses that we're consciously aware of are so partial to what we're actually experiencing, and perhaps things like dowsing are a way that we show ourselves what we physically know at an unconscious level. So, for example, if you're aware of like electromagnetic things or moisture, things like this, what's sensorily, but you can't feel from this conscious awareness, having some kind of physical manifestation that is not under conscious control could help you become aware of these things. And I think psychology now is starting to have this openness and this ability to explore quite subtle things, which I find very exciting.
That's brilliant. I'm greatly reassured to hear that. So yeah, I look forward to hearing more and following some of those ideas.
Doesn't that also go hand in hand with technology? That the more technology we can evolve, the easier it's going to be to, in a sense, recognise these things. And, as I think someone already said, is to measure them so that we can interpret them and how they affect us.
Exactly, our senses are so limited, so when we start to look at different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, quantum phenomena that are like fundamentally outside our conception, our view of the world suddenly explodes, and we understand how limited this kind of binary, fragmented consciousness actually is.
Okay.